a blessed mother. We here this morning have come to celebrate this wonderful day we call Mother's Day. And by the way, those of you who haven't called your mom yet, let me give you some encouragement. Make sure you call your mom just as soon as you get home. And all the moms said, Amen. Now, some of us don't have our mothers anymore. And I can tell you, I miss my mother. Very quiet woman, said very little, but what she said was always full of wisdom. Sometimes my mother, she never made statements to you. She never scolded you. She always started like Jesus did. She always asked a question. And after she had asked the question, and you attempted to answer it, you would know that all was said, and she didn't have to ask anymore or say anymore. The message was loud and clear. We are here to celebrate Mother's Day. That day has been set aside for us, as President Woodrow Wilson said on May 9th, 1914, when Congress declared the second Sunday in May as Mother's Day. President Wilson said that this day has been set aside for a time for public expression of our love and reverence for the mothers of our country. And I tell you, of all that mothers do for us while we are growing up, and even after we get out of the house, they deserve at least one day out of the year to be honored and to have gifts and calls and cards sent to them. Have you ever thought about all the roles that your mother filled while you and I were growing up? I just took time to note a few of this. This is not an exhaustive list, but let me just put it a little bit to you in what I've observed being in North America for over 30 plus years. Mothers are nurse, counselor, spiritual advisor, educator, nutritionist, accountant, transportation center, maid, peacemaker, entertainer. Now, I came up with those in just a few minutes. There are so many other roles that our mothers fulfill each day and every day. So today on Mother's Day, we want to thank you all, to our mothers and grandmothers, for your undying love and commitment. I picked up, it's kind of an obscure passage to preach on the topic of Mother's Day. But I've chosen this for a specific purpose. And I hope you'll follow along as we look at this passage. It's taken from 2 Kings chapter 4, verses 8 to 37. Verses 8 to 37, a blessed mother. And I'm just going to, it's Mother's Day, and some of you, I hope you can take your mothers out for a meal, or you want to go and visit your mother, and especially during this COVID-19 time, a lot of things are so complicated. So I hope you will do your best to, again, bless your mothers and grandmothers today like you've never done before. First, I want to just set three main things from this passage. I want you to notice focus priorities. 2 Kings chapter 4, verses 8 to 37. Focus priorities. These are just main outlines to help you to, when you read this passage, to understand. Second, I want you to note family partnerships. Focus priorities, family partnerships, and then third, I want you to note faith persuasion. Faith persuasion. With those three just main outline heading, let me throw this words to you this morning. Our priorities mold our living. Focus priorities. Our priorities mold our living. I saw a mother that had twins, 2 months old, beautiful children. Oh my. I would stand in line day or night for those precious lives. And as we were there, the babies began to fuss a little bit. And somebody said to the mother, I think it's time to feed them. And before I know, these twins were pulled out of their seats and they were being fed. Just precious little souls in the arm of a mother and a relative, and they were both being fed. Our priorities mold our living in every aspect of life. What you make your priority is what you will focus on. First, I want you to see this woman's heart. See the woman's heart. She's a giver. She's a giver. 2 Kings chapter 4 verse 8. One day Elisha went to Shunem, where a wealthy woman lived, who urged him to eat some food. So whenever he passed that way, he would turn in there to eat food. Now you need to understand the spiritual backdrop of what's happening. Remember, Elisha is the prophet that will come after Elijah. Remember what happened to Elijah. After the great miracle on Mount Carmel, he received a threatening note from Jezebel, and Elijah was tired. He had worked hard for the Lord in trying to serve the Lord by trying to bring God's people back to himself. And this time he gets discouraged and he runs away, and he just wants to die. He's had enough. But then remember the story, God will feed Elijah and then give him another ministry to a widow that was about to end her life because they'd run out of food. There was nothing more to feed her and her son, the last hand of meal that was left, and God did a miracle. And then God said, go and call this man Elisha. And Elisha will replace Elijah in the ministry as a prophet of God to the children of Israel. It was not a happy spiritual time. God's people had moved away from God. So really, and when people move away from God, they don't like preachers or prophets. So it was a tough time for Elisha as the prophet of God, great man of God. But he did not stop carrying out his responsibilities before men of God. So I want you to see this woman's heart. She's a giver. She's called a Shunammite woman. She feeds the men of God, and then she goes a step further. She provided a place of rest. Now, she was wealthy. The Bible tells us that. So why would, in the time when people are drying up spiritually, why would this woman turn her attention to Elisha, the prophet of God? Let's follow along. You see, there was a spiritual perception this woman had. And then we notice, not only did she have a spiritual perception, she also served the people of God. So in 2 Kings chapter 4 verse 9, and she said to her husband, behold now, I know that this is a holy man of God who is continually passing our way. Let us make a small room on the roof with walls and put there for him a bed, a table, a chair, and a lamp, so that whenever he comes to us, he can go in there. One day he came there, and he turned into the chamber and rested there. So she provides food. Every time Elisha goes by there, he's provided with nourishment. Remember, there was no retirement pension for the prophets of God. All they had is what God provided through the people. And this woman becomes the main provider for food and a place to stay for Elisha. She fed this man of God. She provided a place of rest. See this woman's heart. She is a giver. Now many of us know mothers are givers. Secondly, I want you to see not only the woman's heart, I want you to see the woman's humility, purity. I want you to see the woman's humility, and I put the word purity next to that point. There are three things I want you to see. She served out of faith, seeking nothing back. In a world where it's more give me, give me, give me, sometimes when someone gives you, there's always that underlying statement, well, one day I will want some back, or I want something else. She served out of faith, seeking nothing back. She was humble to receive the gift. And this is the most tremendous gift. She received a son through a miracle that will come because of her heart. But I also want you to know she is wealthy, but she was barren. And a woman in that era, in that time, to be childless was looked down upon, was frowned upon. She's giving nothing back to carry on her husband's name. So let's follow the story in verse 12. 2 Kings chapter 4 verse 12. And he said to Gehazi, this is Elisha speaking to Gehazi his servant. He said to Gehazi his servant, call the Shunammite. And when he had called her, she stood before him. Not only was this woman has spiritual perception, this woman was a service to the people of God. But she was also a person who was satisfied with the position. Being barren, childless, she did not stop serving those around her. So we look at 2 Kings chapter 4, 13. And we read, and he said to him, say now to her, see, you have taken all this trouble for us. What is it to be done for you? Would you have a word spoken on your behalf to the king or to the commander of the army? She answered, I dwell among my own people. In other words, very politely, she said, no, I don't need that. And he said, what then is to be done for her? Gehazi, the servant, answered, well, she has no son, and her husband is old. That means maybe she's past the age of bearing children. And in that culture at that time, not to have a child to look after you in your old age, you would be in deep trouble, especially when you lose your husband. In verse 15, he said, call her. And when he had called her, she stood in the doorway.